Can they hear me on the Zoom?
If you can turn on your microphone.
Yeah,
that
that's
would
good.
be.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
yeah,
We hear you.
yeah.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, I'm RJ. I've introduced myself a few times now, but RJ. So I wanted to talk to you about some of the data that I thought some people in this group might be interested in working on. So this is data that we collected in my lab. Yeah, so this is some data that was collected during my PhD. It's story listening data. So we put people in an MRI machine. This is a picture of an MRI machine. It's actually our MRI machine. While they listen to stories, so podcasts that you might listen to on the way home from work. We record their brain data, and then we try to do cool things with it. So I'm just going to give a brief overview about what MRI data is, what an MRI machine is, and show you a few of the ideas I have about what this group might be able to work with. So yeah, so MRI, an MRI machine is just basically a giant magnet that can read information about the magnetic fields that blood in your brain produces. So this signal, this blood signal, is called the Bold signal. It's the blood oxygen level dependent signal, and it acts as an indirect proxy for neural activations in the brain. So as neurons use oxygen, blood flows into those areas at a some time delay after the neurons are used, and that's what we see in the scanner. So this data has some unusual properties. It has low temporal resolution, so we get one image every 2 seconds, and it has a temporal lag. So this blood flow happens after these activations actually occur. So this lag is anywhere from 6 to 10 seconds. And the data has a spatial resolution that is quite high. So we get these voxels, volumetric pixels, that are about 17 cubic millimeters, 2.7 millimeters to a side, right about. This is about 90,000 voxels per brain. So we're able to see brain activity at this highly granular level, which is quite nice. And like I said, this data is on people listening to stories in the scanner. So we collected an enormous amount of data. For 3 subjects, we were focused on doing deep data collection. So the data that we collected here was 20 hours of data each per subject of story data. Yeah. So just to give you an idea of the kind of things that you can do with this data, primarily what we work on are language encoding models. And this might be familiar to those people who saw Nima's talk earlier this morning. The idea here is that we take our stimulus, we transcribe it into some annotations, and then we feed it through some model, perhaps a large language model like GPT or Llama 2, to get some high-dimensional representation of the information contained in that language, an abstraction that we can work with. And then we perform some small things. We downsample the data so that it aligns temporally with our FMRI data, so that it has that 2-second temporal resolution. And then we add FR delays to model that hemodynamic delay that I mentioned before. But then at the end, we just learn some ridge weights, some linear weights from this time delay downsampled features to the voxels that we see in the scanner. So really, this is just basically a linear model built on top of the nonlinearities learned by these large language models. And you can, replace this large language model with other types of embedding models. You can use audio foundation models, or you can use word embedding models. All of this stuff works very well. Yeah, so at the end of the day, we can, compare our predictions to the ground truth. Just look at the correlation between our prediction and the ground truth. And this works shockingly well. So on the left here, what we have is a picture of a brain. It doesn't look like a normal brain. This is what we call a flat map. It's a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional brain. It's easier to put them on slides than brains. So here, what I've done is I've colored each voxel redder if we're able to predict the response in that voxel better. So we're able to predict an enormous amount of brain activity using this approach, this very simple linear approach on top of large language models. So a lot of temporal node, and plenty of these regions that are not well understood, like prefrontal cortex, for example. And over on the right here is just the response of a single voxel. So the region I've circled in blue, this is called fusiform face area. It's a very well understood area. We presented the same stimulus to a subject 10 times, and we recorded their brain response in this voxel. The light black lines are each of those 10 responses, and then the dark black line is the average of those 10 responses. And then our prediction was in red. So really quite impressive that we were able to do this to this degree.
You mentioned this. How do you deal with time?
Yeah, so the way we deal with time is by doing this downsampling approach that I mentioned. So yeah, I'm happy to talk with you about it more, but it's it's a detail that doesn't matter too much. Yeah, so as you can see, we're able to do this prediction quite well. And just one other thing I want to mention before I get to the project ideas that I have, which is that even though there's this clear, very nice correspondence between the activations of these neural networks and the responses that we see in brains, the brain has one sort of unique aspect to it that these neural networks don't have, which is that they can be modular to a degree, semantically modular. So I'm not going to explain everything on this slide, but I just want to point out one or two details. A lot of regions care about specific semantic categories or specialize for those categories because over millions of years of evolution, we've learned that these are categories that are important to our survival. So for example, exostriate body area cares about body parts. It's really focused on that sort of thing. The fusiform face area region I mentioned earlier cares a lot about faces. And some of these some regions are selected for scenes, et cetera. This is a natural property of brains. They're physical objects. They have modularity to them. Yeah. So some potential application, some projects that I'd be interested in working with people on using this data here. So there's sort of two ways we can look at this. There's on the one hand, maybe ways that this neuroscience data can help NLP and ways that that NLP approaches can help neuroscience. So I've separated them out into these two categories here. So the first one being, can we use this fMRI data to enrich either interpretability or these models? The first project being, can we use these encoding models, this semantic modularity to help us build large language models? Can we sort of exploit this property somehow? This is a linear mapping that has this nice property that it disentangles these linear combinations of features into something that is more coherent, more one-hot. So that's the first idea. I'd be happy to work with anyone. Talk to me after this. I'd be willing to discuss it more. Another idea is, can we somehow use these brain representations to augment the representations learned by these large language models? So there's some way we can learn from these biases or do some sort of trick, because obviously the brain is able to represent so much more than these large language models are currently capable of. And the other half is sort of more on the neuroscience side of things. So can we better understand this modularity, this sparsity in the brain? So the first question here being, are there some regions that are more modular than others? And there's reason to believe that there is. These regions that are closer to the ventral stream or the visual cortex are probably more modular, but we don't know this for sure. It'd be nice if we could come up with some nice sparsity metric, perhaps some way of querying these models to look at this modularity and see if we can make a nice flat map that maps out how modular these types of concepts are in the brain. And the second idea is more pointing to another project that we're going to try to do in the auditory group, which is, can we automate the understanding of semantic selectivity in the brain? So can we make these LLMs into little mini AI scientists that do our experiments for us and tell us which brain regions are selected for what, and hopefully enrich our understanding that way. So yeah, these are the projects that I'm interested in pursuing. I'm happy to talk with people more. Thank you for your time. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to take questions. I just don't know how much time I have. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm curious. I've never worked with FMRI data, but maybe if you can give like high-level overview of what's the format of the data, how big is the data set,
Yes.
How you would use it. So
yeah,
like
of course.
like
Yeah, so again, it's 20 hours of data. This corresponds to about 30,000 TRs. These are these 2-second time windows that we get one image from. And the format of the data is actually just a matrix. So we have, time by responses. So we have, 90,000 voxels on one axis, and we have the 30,000 time points on the other. And that's it. It's very simple. We've put a lot of effort into making this approachable to people who want to work with it and don't have a lot of experience with neuroscience. Yeah, it's all open source. I'm happy to point. Sorry. The presentation, it's all audio, so they're hearing these podcasts. It's not read, if that's the question. Hope I yeah, so it's originally audio. We transcribe it so these large language models we can feed that data through the large language model.
What you're saying is it time indexed into that matrix that you?
Yes. So we have we know what word happens at what time and so on. Yeah, all that's been annotated manually, very, very slowly. Yeah. Kavya, yeah.
What semantic modularity in your last slide, it's like.
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea being that there are some regions that are very selective for one specific category. So they're modular. It's not like everything is doing everything. One region is specialized for a particular type of computation. And that's what I mean by semantic modularity. So fusiform face area, that region I mentioned earlier, is highly selective for computing things, recognizing faces, understanding faces. And that's what that region does. It's not also co-opted when you're doing calculus. Does that make sense? Yeah, so semantic modularity is this concept that there are different regions that are semantically selective for different things. Yeah.
I'm surprised that region was one you were able to predict so well, given the image stimulus was audio. Was it?
Yeah, the face areas actually didn't do that. I was just using it's a very well unknown example, but we do other things like body areas and such that are more commonly expressed in words as opposed to vision. Yeah.
Really cool work.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Adam Desolane, everybody. My colleagues are Michael Maynard, Cornelia, and Giannis. As you may know, all of them have been to Telluride before, and we're with University of Maryland, College Park. I'm here to present two ideas that I think are of relevance here at Telluride, and one on representing actions as programs, and the second on representing top-down connections with mid-vision feedback. So these are both works that exist, and we'd like to develop them further here. So when it comes to action understanding, the task as it is, akin to object classification, is to recognize the actions that the human is performing, right? So look at what the person's doing and recognize what they're doing. Like another prominent task is to anticipate what they do next at some fixed anticipation point. And we also want to understand the underlying task structure. So not necessarily what we observed, but what they were trying to do, alternative approaches, alternative action sequences that achieve the goal state. And this is the kinds of data that we work with. This is from the Epic Kitchens data set. You can see that it's very challenging. So forward. Why do we use egocentric video? Well, egocentric video, as opposed to other perspectives, like from the third person, have the hands in full view most of the time. We have direct access to the head movement, and the newer data sets have access to eye movements, which we are actually very interested in exploring, like how cognitive actions might be incorporated into our action repertoire. Something very promising is that whatever you learn over human demonstrations, over unstructured, easy to record human video, can be directly transferred to a robot. And we have some recent work that transfers visual representations learned from egocentric video to robot simulated environments. It shows that we're able to show that you learn a lot more efficiently than if you were to use visual representations from, like, say, ImageNet, which has like lots of nice flowers, but may not be useful for robots that want to affect change into the world. So if you learn over objectives that are based on motion, egocentric video, as opposed to like appearance, you're able to learn a lot more. You're able to generalize in robot environments a lot more quickly. So why are we interested in action understanding from a biological standpoint? Well, in 1995, mirror neurons were discovered by some Italian researchers, and they basically activate both when you perform actions like reaching, grasping, or holding objects, and when you interpret those actions, those very same actions. So the implication is that if the same processes are responsible for both understanding and generating action, then maybe a viable approach to making robots that can explore in the real world is from the recognition of action standpoint, right? Maybe if we train vision networks to recognize and anticipate actions, maybe they'll be competent at performing them as well. Let's again take a look at the same video. Action is very complicated, right? Because it has perception, it involves real world objects. It's also of a motoric nature in that it involves bodily movements. It's also hierarchical, and there are some actions that are lower level than other actions, right? Like if I move my finger, that's a lower level than grasping an object, and so on. And it's also compositional in that you can take different actions and mix and match them together to create new actions. So how do we choose to represent them? Well, we represent them with action programs, right? So you have these programs of action. So there are 3 actions performed that could be exist in the data set, like close door, take plate, and put plate. And we believe that action programs are a very attractive representation for capturing all that we wish to model in this problem. What are the components, right? Well, we have perceptual primitives based on whatever data set is being considered. We have motoric primitives that we adopt universally across many video data sets. We have these motoric primitives we've defined based on some 1920s research on motion economy. So some industrialists were wishing to create a language of action that allowed them to make their workers more efficient, right? They put a lot of thought into this and did a very good job. And so they came up with this concept called Thorbligs, which is the name of the founder in reverse. So there's 24 Thorbligs, 16 are physical, 8 are cognitive. And for this work, we've only explored physical primitives, but we wish with eye movements to explore cognitive Thorbligs as well. So the primitives, motoric primitives, Thorbligs, are just like grab, release, use, move, orient, etc. And this is a good basis for representing more complex actions, right? So you can perform actions. You can perform the same action in different ways, as we've been able to capture in this program. If you'd like to dice a cucumber repetitively with a knife, that's different from throwing everything into a blender. You can also say that programs capture the what and the why, the what being like the physical sub-actions that are the transitions from state to state, and the states being like the preconditions, the states being accepted by these preconditions, right, which define the operations performed. It should be noted that like these programs afford like a very rich counterfactual structure, and that it's not a single plan, but really a variety of plans based on whatever circumstances you like a robot or like the human may find themselves in, right? So that's really interesting to explore in the future. So how do we arrive at these action programs? Well, we have these like visual modules, right? So one extracts audio, another extracts head movements, and like, for example, like walking behaviors and turnings of head. We have the labels of the data sets, and we have a faster RCNN model that extracts like the objects and the nouns associated, and a hand object contact detector, which describes which detects the making and breaking of contact in video. And we feed an incomplete program of all this textual information to an LLM, along with definitions of the motor primitives and the perceptual primitives. And the LLM auto-completes the incomplete program provided to create a program based on the video observed. So this is very similar to the prog prompt paper by NVIDIA, except that was not actually generated from video. So that's like the important distinction. These programs are generated directly from unconstrained video. Prog prompt just feeds in like some language and like extracts and creates a program out of that at a language level. But those programs don't really capture like, the physical rules of the world, right? Like the physical aspects of action. So we use these action programs as an intermediary representation for recognizing and anticipating actions. And we find that in the action recognition competition of the Epic Kitchens challenge, we're able to perform better than all approaches that were published at the time of submission. So this is not the case right now. Right now, like, Google and NVIDIA made submissions. They made like really big models like that outperformed our approach by something like 5 percentage points. So they've used private video data sets and much bigger models to outperform us. So what can be done with this idea? Currently, one very problematic thing is that we're upper bounded by the performance of the LLM. That's the bottleneck that produces the programs. In reality, we want to, so we're using a frozen LLM, right? Like just GPT-4. We're not like fine tuning it. We want to self-supervise LLMs over video. And there's a lot of possible ways to go about that. But, here are some, right? We want to, instead of representing action programs at the symbolic level, we want to parameterize them further with these physical aspects of action. We also want to structure the visual representations better according to the structure of the action programs. We've done some work, but not with action programs, but based on structuring visual representations based on higher level semantics. There's also other possibilities, and we have ideas as to how this could be approached. And we have the data set of action programs open sourced, and so that's open for use. And we also have a better data set of action programs that can be used as well. So the second idea is based on mid-vision feedback. Sorry, this is, okay, good, it's not covering. So the intuition is that, let's say you have some knowledge, some contextual knowledge of the image you wish to classify. Let's say, you have some attribute of the cat, right? 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, the fur, whatever, right? This knowledge, can be given. So you have this knowledge, right? And you can bias the mid-level features of a bottom-up visual network to produce context-aligned classifications of the image, right? And so this is good because vision networks are typically bottom-up. We have a method for top-down, a mechanism for top-down integration of high-level knowledge. And this is very important because most of the connections in the visual cortex are top-down, not bottom-up. And so it's important that we have mechanisms to implement this. So let's start out. We're interested in image classification. This is a toy example. We have an image to be classified. We have some a context ontology. So animate versus inanimate, which is like a very biologically motivated context ontology, because that's very important to know for a given object. So we know that a horse is animate. We bias the features of the mid-level features of this associated with this picture of a horse with an orthogonality loss by contrasting it with an inanimate object and enforcing cosine distance similarity. So we then retrieve an affine transformation matrix associated with the context, this context in particular. So animate. So we have affines we have an affine for animate objects and an affine for inanimate objects, and we modulate the mid-level features of this network after the orthogonalization loss is applied by this affine, and then we just subsequently classify the image, right? So that's at a simple level, like what it is, right? We have some recent extensions. So we've also applied this over video. It can be applied in many different ways. And also this knowledge doesn't have to be given as ground truth. It can be predicted. So we also, this, I will not go in detail into this, but in this previous work we just described, the contexts were hand designed, right? Like we basically said, okay, we have affine and inanimate objects. We have large and small objects. We hand defined this context ontology. In reality, you can use an LLM to discover which contexts are important, right? You can create an overall program describing how you would apply contexts. You can bias your mid-level features of your given vision network with a very complex combination of contexts to arrive at context-aligned features. So not just one feedback operation, as we did in the mid-vision feedback paper, but really like many feedback operations that are possible. So what can be done here, right? So one thing is that feedback was really designed just for CNNs. We didn't really think very well about how to apply it to transformer-based architectures, though we did in the ICLR paper, and we showed that it improved results very well, but not as much for not as much as it improved the results of our CNN models. And we have like a very good intuition as to what the best thing to do is to make it work for, as well for our transformer architectures. That's one. And another thing is that this mechanism can really be used for any problem where you have knowledge, that's high level and symbolic. And perhaps, you could, instead of using, we can also, you can also talk to me about how you would use continuous representations as opposed to the symbols that we stuck to. So that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. I think this is one of the most helpful things in just the last few minutes is this idea that we, humanity have a tendency to make someone ourselves. Well, he must have so much favor on his life. Must have some blessing and anointing. It's not fair. It's not fair for him. It's just not fair. He's okay. She's okay. I'm struggling. And yet we all have 168 hours in the week. We all have these 7 days in the week. We're typically we have similar time. We've got a couple of eyes, a couple of arms, a couple of legs. So there must be something else to this. And I think one of the most helpful things that I've understood over the years, and I'm learning more and more, is that God just doesn't give you what you ask for. He's just too good. He's too loving. He's so faithful. He gives you what you can faithfully manage. And so it's incumbent upon us to make the reorganization of life. And it's upon us to prepare and dig the ditch.
Oh,
And
I think you said stick it on your laptop.
talk about time
So that way,
we all have the same amount of time, but you have global responsibilities. When I was with you 2-3 weeks ago, we were filming and Julie said, "Oh, Apostle stepped out. The king called. The king and queen called." And I thought, "Wow, you're on the phone with the king. I think the king of Nigeria, and the Lord has given you this responsibility, and yet you have learned to walk in His presence. You've learned to go deep. You've learned the secret of it. So time is one of those things that arguably every one of our listeners could manage better. So in order to get to the assignment, could we talk about this for a minute? Arguably the first assignment of money in life is to help us redeem time. Absolutely. Can go deep with God. New perspective is right there. We're stuck in the four walls of our home. The Spirit is ready to shift our gaze out of the window. And I remember you bringing this up with the global team at Galveston, looking out the window, and suddenly there's this aha, there's an opportunity, there's blessing, supernatural blessing. How do you organize your time to be with the Lord, to say no to the right things, to say yes to the Lord, to redeem the time, and even to use money and as a good assignment to redeem your time, to create a space? Could you talk about that? Because I think all of our listeners, everyone can relate to the idea that we're pulled in a lot of directions and we wonder, well, it's okay for him, it's okay for her, but how do I create a Well, two things. First of all,
you need to actually do some auditory work stuff too this hour. So we're gonna have half hour for discussion and a half hour for auditory work through project planning and stuff. You're welcome to stay for all of it, but I wanted to let you know that we're gonna try to keep this to a half hour. We can do more of this if we need to. This is an issue that's been bothering me for like a year or two, and I've talked to a bunch of people, and it's also an interest of other people. And I don't have a well-formed story yet. Ramani will say something more definite than me probably, but it's been very useful to even discuss this idea before we present it. So it's a work in progress. I think there's a whole bunch of interesting issues. There's a lot of really smart people here. Ask questions, and we'll try to come to some conclusion. Now, Ramani's going to do the first part, and I'll do the second part.
Sure. So this.
Right, Earl.
Okay, so, there was a whole bunch of, couple of 100 years of research where people did, these 3 pillars of scientific modeling, sort of experiment, hypothesis, modeling, computational models, etc. And over the last 10 or 15 years, everything became, you collect a bunch of data and let the data give you the explanations, right? And this works very well, but is not intellectually satisfying. So how can we sort of live in both these worlds? And that's been because I invested most of my career mostly on this side. I wanted to be able to justify my existence in this new world. So, so sorry, I'm not very good with this. What's right arrow? Okay, but I don't see it anymore here. Something happened.
Oh, damn computers.
No, there is. In the end, of course, in the end, as soon as you,
There.
so I had a very good friend in high school, in college, and he said the most intelligent people don't remember anything. They are able to create everything from just a couple of axioms. And sort of that's this. So, so anyway, so the point is, why is deep learning so great? You can collect a bunch of data, you can give it to a high school student, and provided they don't use ChatGPT like Shihab student, they will program it, they'll have input and outputs, and they will sort of train it. And all of this is due to the fact that there is this backpropagation algorithm which works on these function of functions and is able to find all the weights very quickly. And training is via gradient descent. But on the other hand, if you go and look at the models that we as physicists or biologists or whatever else created, they were all pretty messy, and they are not capable of being differentiated with currently. So that seemed to be one area that not only me, many others have been looking at. And in particular, I was looking at how to fit forward models that my group had developed into this deep learning paradigm and somehow use that. So there are a bunch of research streams which are going on, which is in the literature, which is sort of relevant to this. So there's differentiable programming, probabilistic programming. There is differentiable physics. And the really successful people in this have been the graphics folks who have done neural radiance fields. But even there's not much physics in their forward models. But it's still very interesting. It's been very successful. And of course, one big benefit of deep learning are these programming frameworks, which we old fuddy-duddies have to go back and reuse and learn because they provide us differentiation for free. So that has been sort of our focus. And in particular, we have sort of a question. Let's say we have a forward model and we made it differentiable. How do we have it work with deep learning? And so I'm having, yes. So if you write a function, let's say you wrote a function, sound came into the ear and out came out strf. You wrote this function. Now you want to take some error metric and on the strf, and you want to go back through the network and update some parameters of your network, of what's going on. So this is differentiable in the sense that you took the gradient of an error with respect to whatever your code that you wrote did. Or maybe you wrote some code for having sound bounce off an object and you computed the scattered field, but you don't know the shape of the object. So you want to somehow differentiate and find the shape of the object. So that would be an application of differentiable sort of programming. But I'm happy to chat one-on-one separately. So there are many places you can stick your physics forward model. and you can get all sorts of interesting things going on. So some of my students are exploring all of these kind of places to stick these models in. And currently we have 4 projects sort of going on with already some reasonable results. So one is something called impedance tomography, where the underlying equation is a Poisson equation from physics. And people are able to write a differentiable structure for that. Room acoustics models, a DSP filter thing, and models of human hearing, where I've sort of collaborated with Shihab, and which is sort of most relevant to this. But the general paradigm of taking something which is classical, making it differentiable, and plugging it into deep learning is something that I think has legs, and all of us should consider deeply. And this is an obligatory picture of this thing. We could go. Yeah. Run gradient descent, but that is the, so let me go back to 2 slides just to, so this is basically running gradient descent. But there are other approaches where you can stick a neural network. You can create different physics models. Maybe you have a selection of physics models. You can tie it with an LLM, and the LLM can write your model. So many ideas. So no, because the physics model is always sort of there. So in the end, after the thing is trained, you still have the physics model and its parameters living.
Sorry, I get clarification. What do you call a physics model?
Physics model is basically, because of my background, when I say physics model, I consider equations of, Maxwell's equations, or equations of fluid flow, or any other kind of equations of wave propagation and so on. Yeah, no, in the forward direction, but not in the reverse direction.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
It's harder. Yeah.
They can be made different. That is the sort of art and science.
Yeah.
Which is truly number. That is a way to go. That people are creating differentiable versions that have the same input and output. And the core command also is really not differentiable. Until they created a version that is differentiable. So that way you can back propagate it through.
Let's go on. I've got some more examples of that. Answer it.
Yeah, and I think once Malcolm finishes, maybe we should discuss in a more sort of. You should give the samples.
I've got one.
Yeah.
I've got some. Ramani and I didn't have a whole lot of time to coordinate, so I think I've got some of it. So we're not doing DNNs for prediction and classification. I mean, that's a classic thing to do, is you do classification and prediction, and you have a DNN and make some output, and it's all good. So we don't want to do that. We're modeling the brain, the internals of the brain. We want to adjust to, did I put this in? Yeah. We want to adjust to disability, so we want to customize the models. It's often called the digital twin, and that's sort of what's motivating my stuff. To give further details on that, I want to build hyper-personalized models of a person's auditory system. Everybody, all of us are over the age of 18 and have less than perfect hearing. But yet the models that we get to work with, like Shields model or Laura Carney's model, or everybody else doing these things, are just trying to model a generic human performance or an animal performance or whatever. So it's a generic model, and we want to tweak these models to fit every person, perhaps with different hearing thresholds, perhaps with neural deficits like synaptopathy. So we want to build this model and then tweak it to fit the person. We've done this about a year ago, and there's a paper that just came out. Dick Lyon's model is called CARFAC, Cascade of Asymmetric Resonators. I can't remember what the FAC stands for. And there's a bunch of people at Google that did this work. And as Ramani mentioned, JAX provides the tools to make this really easy. So you describe your model in terms of basic equations, and I'll show what that looks like. And then JAX keeps track of every single step in that network, which isn't necessarily a DNN, but it's every step, so that you then do the inverse. You can do the backward derivatives. And the goal is, as Ramani said, you've got some output, and you want it to match some other outputs. So that's an air signal. You want to propagate that air signal back through the network to control the parameters. And one of the questions that came up earlier is you can do that through parameters, but you can't do that through architecture. So if one of your parameters is whether it's a 4-channel or 5-channel network, then you can't differentiate through that. But you can certainly differentiate through nonlinearities like sines and cosines and ReLUs and maxes and things like that.
And there is an art to differentiating through 4 channels and 5 channels.
Yeah, you
So-
can do it. It's harder.
Yeah, it's hard. So for example, one of my students is looking at differentiating through Voronoi diagrams.
Highly nonlinear.
Highly nonlinear, but on the other hand, plausible.
So to make the physics more concrete, this is Dick's model, CARFACT. This is the exact model. We've differentiated this in JAX. It's a transmission line, so sound comes in here, propagates down the basilar membrane. There's these outer hair cells that are controlling the mechanical properties. The sound is picked up by the inner hair cells. There's some AGC logic that's understanding what's coming through and generating a response that goes in the physics back to the object. And the actual inner hair cell is this combination of factors. So it's not a DNN, but it's still a network of operations. And I think the CARFACT model is 5,000 or 6,000 parameters. So from DNN point of view, it's fairly small. On the other hand, it's very, very nonlinear. And that's one of the things that is an issue here that I wanted to bring up. The biggest issue and sort of the smallest and biggest issue are these IIR filters. And here's a simple, I guess this is 2 pole. I was hoping for 1 pole, but anyway, the signal comes in, there's a delay line, you sum up with some weight and that affects the output. That's exactly equivalent to an RNN in the deep neural network world. And then here's another version of the same thing with a cascade of second order sections. And the part where it gets really interesting and the part that's really troublesome is, this output over here is the output over here is, this one. The output over here is what we want. We're trying to match it to some output. And we have to go back through all these operations to get back to the parameters. And with digital filters, there's 2 stages involved. And that's sort of where some of the interesting math comes in. So these filter block diagrams in terms of A's and B's. Here's the feedback path, here's the feed forward path. And you get these filter coefficients by doing some very complicated math based on some parameters that you put into the network. So if you're building an auditory model, the parameters might be filter bandwidth, filter center frequency. You have a whole bunch of them for different parts of the filter bank. And one question that we have, and one of the troublesome things is, if you're trying to do these things, you're trying to make a model that's more realistic, do you back propagate to the filter coefficient level? Or do you try to back propagate all the way back to the parameters? JAX is perfectly happy doing either one of them. But it's a very nonlinear process. And this is easy. But the problem with just doing this is that you end up with something that might not be physically plausible. So if you modify the A's and B's, then it could be unstable. It could be completely a different kind of system. It could be anything.
So can I?
Yeah.
So we've done one very interesting project. So we've taken HRIRs, which are 128 tap FIR or 256 tap FIR filters, and we've replaced them with 16 coefficient IIRs and 16 complex coefficient 32 sort of thing. And we get very, very low error and sort of by building a differentiable model and coming down to the coefficients, and it works very well. And so we are trying to get that published, but yeah.
I'm going to speed through a couple of things because I want to get to the question.
Asking, then you engineer the model,
What?
the architecture in order to differentiate.
No, we write the code in JAX. We write the cost function, which is sort of in JAX. And we try to massage the layout of these IIR, generic IIR, to avoid the instability business which Malcolm just mentioned. And we have a constrained backprop using there's no deep network in this. It's just a pure sort of trying to use the differentiability and gradient descent and atom to sort of compress to find the coefficients.
But sorry, what are you trying to predict? You said you have very low error. What is it that's very low?
We have the spectral response, the temporal response, and various other sort of features which form an error magnitude between the FIR convolution with a given signal of interest and the IIR convolution with a given signal of interest, and minimize that error.
To provide some context before I forget.
Yeah.
JAX is very much a spin-off of NumPy.
Yeah.
And NumPy is very much a spin-off of MATLAB.
Yes.
So you can actually trace the genealogy, and they're very close to each other. They're close enough that they're very annoying because
Yeah.
you understand.
Oh, just in the interest of time, I wanted to get to what is the unresolved issue there?
There are some unresolved issues. I can
Let
talk.
me finish this.
Yeah.
So this is what some of the issues are with the contract implementation. There's a bunch of state variables involved. There's these weight parameters, these weights that are the filter coefficients. There's some hyperparameters, and then the design parameters like filter bandwidth and stuff. And so you have to keep track of all these things. There's other people who work on this. Josh McDermott has done this as a black box approach. So he's been trying to predict voxels using just a conventional convolutional neural network. So we're not the only people working on this. I just wanted to mention this. Sarah Verhulst has a biologically plausible model. And I wanted to put this up. These are some initial questions. You guys have lots of other questions, which is good. And I put this picture on the screen because one of the questions I have, I've actually implemented this, I've done this. I've tried to take the derivative, I've taken the derivatives. I've had an error function. And when I go all the way back to the model, it doesn't change the parameters in a useful way. And so I'm sort of wondering if are you poking in the wrong thing? Are you poking on the tail of the tiger, and you don't actually have control of what's going on here? And so that's some issues about effectiveness of the differentiation.
Yeah, or pulling or pushing on the rope kind of.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. That might have been a better icon.
Yeah.
I'm told that the purpose of making differentiable some signal processing modules is just end-to-end training.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not really learning new parameters.
Well, no, but it is.
Maybe the parameter of the filters, they are predetermined, you want to train end-to-end, no?
What you said is absolutely correct. That's how most people think of it. And they usually stick it with a deep learning kind of a thing. But what I would like to think, which is probably obvious, but at the same time not, or wasn't obvious to me before, is any math you did, any function you wrote before can be made differentiable for free, quote unquote.
Can be implemented.
Yeah,
In a
differentiable way.
Okay.
And now you can suddenly start to think of other ways of using that model that you may not have thought of before.
Yes, but I mean the fact that the filter doesn't change.
It does.
It does.
Yes, but you say there was no. Okay, sorry.
What doesn't change, what's hard to change is
The architecture.
the block diagram architecture. So if you have blocks coming in and out because you changed, because you don't know whether you need a third order, fourth order filter, that's hard to differentiate through. But once you fix the signal flow, you have a computational graph, and then you can differentiate backwards to that. So so then you can do the end-to-end training.
Yes.
Isn't it the case that a third order is a special case of
Yes.
fourth order?
Yeah.
And so if you
could
could
do that.
normally find it,
You could over parameterize, yeah.
so what would be the downside of that?
You could end up with things that don't make sense, because it's trying to take one filter and split it into two pieces or an extra pole or something. You could end up with over parameterization, which might not be bad.
I mean, it does raise the issue of overfitting.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can tweak all these things, and you have limited data to do the tweaking, could bad things happen?
Yeah. I think for me, the big issue for me is how physically realistic do you want to be? And is that important?
So that is a good question. But for me, as more as a toolsmith, the questions are, well, one bad thing about these DAX things is that depending on what you're doing, it retains too much useless information, and it makes you run out of memory and so forth as you're trying to run differentiability on really big models. And so there is, you have to realize which parts you need to retain and so on. So that gets more into the hand coding of the gradients, which are automatically done.
So RJ said he was gonna defend the black box approach.
Oh.
You
Yeah.
wanna say
Sure,
something?
yeah, I mean, I would just say that, it's. The way I see it is that it's fine to build these biologically plausible models for these, simple systems that are, early stage. Signal processing that our body does, like for instance, cochlear stuff or very low level auditory cortex. But when you're trying to model something that is much more complex than something that anyone can reasonably write down on the blackboard, then you're already outside the space of what is even possible for a human to try to model out. So you have to go with this deep learning approach. You have to use these black box models because there's no other alternative. If you're trying to model what a voxel in prefrontal cortex does as the result of some complicated stimulus involving decision making, high level decision making, you're not going to be able to know what functions to use, how to actually orient, what mathematical,
So the physics.
like, it's just, yeah, what is that? How do you even do that? You have to use the black box model. So I would say, it's fine to go and do this if you have the simple, the early stage signal processing that you want to understand better. But at the end of the day, if you want to just understand these high level features, well, you're gonna have to embrace like black box stuff. That's
Embrace.
Embrace it.
You can do a combination, right? You can include some
Yeah, and-
applications that we know about.
And people say,
especially in self-supervised, yeah,
and just to push back on the
unsupervised.
suggestion that these black box models are just hopelessly uninterpretable. That's not true. There's a huge amount of research now that's working towards making these things explainable. So I think this will be something that's ultimately overcome, and there will be very few downsides to using these
And
models.
perhaps using differentiable models like Cornelia is saying, the question about black box models, how generalizable is it away from its training data? And I don't disagree.
I mean,
I think both of these are tools that as scientists we should use, and what gets the job done.
Right, and the components that you model are unsupervised, right?
No,
They help with data.
we could be supervised, yeah.
So I was gonna say, in my view, the problem is not the type of model you use, interpretable or non-interpretable, or linear or non-linear. The idea is really that you can use any type of model you want, and indeed the mathematical function is gonna encode some features, going to be very complicated. But if you have a very good set of hypotheses and a good design where you're contrasting in a way where you control some of the parameters or some of the properties of your model, even though if you don't have a very good, accurate understanding of what's going on at the point, you still have a framework where you can interpret the data with respect to the design that you put together. So it's really not the model that's incriminating, it's the scientists. If you build a design that can make them useful, then you win, and that's it.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree.
I think for me, I mean, one issue with conventional black box models is they don't do well with high dynamic range. So the cochlea has got 80 dB of input. And so that sort of demands a different approach than a convolutional neural network. But maybe after that, it's okay, like what RJ is doing.
I think sorry.
So, Sriya, and then Sam.
I'm just wondering if my comment is different than Claire's, but I'll just make it more specific. So you understand why black box. So black box is only great and useful, and you don't have to know what's inside and all that, if it's already programmed and trained and learned.
But you can learn that from the data.
Exactly. But many cases, there's just not enough data, or data come from experiments that are really difficult. A good example of that, I'm not saying this is how I do differential, is the imagined speech experiments and all that. doing experiments where you have imagined fMRI and all that stuff is impossible. Impossible. You'll never get enough data to train anything. And so you'd have to do listening and all of that stuff. But be that as it may, vocal track is where we faced exactly that issue. You have a lot of really nice vocal track physical models. But there's not enough data from these models to actually train a neural network to go from input to output. And so what you want is a vocal track model that is differentiable. And so that you can train things with it and all that. And that's why you would use either something like this or alternatives. You can put vocal track, you can put a black box in parallel with the vocal track and train it and so on.
So again, Shiab, you're touching on, just to comment on his, what Malcolm said and what you said, personalization, if you will, to an extent. Because the vocal track models have different pieces, whatever the size, scale, whatever, and so on.
Yeah, just to comment on RJ's comment. I think there are actually two almost philosophical issues. One is the possibility that what is going on and what we're interested in, for example, in the prefrontal cortex, is actually incomprehensible. I mean, it's not something that happens. It's super complex, and it's not something we can put in words or in ideas. It might nonetheless exist, and it might. I mean, the things that make it important, maybe things that we cannot quite grasp. So that's one point. Second point is it's a discussion that seems to have occurred many times in history. For example, people who used to work with vacuum tubes, when we moved to transistors are completely incomprehensible for somebody who understands how a vacuum tube. And when you move from a transistor to integrated circuit, I mean, all of a sudden do you understand what's going on in the, for example, in your cell phone, or in the chips? Yeah, but at what level? At an abstract level.
No, I mean, I know
So
I know the physics and.
So I mean, you know the physics of it, but
Yeah,
you
I'm
don't know.
a double so I understand all the pieces.
Yeah, you don't understand. I mean,
But I think that we all say
Yeah,
the
this
same,
isn't-
where there's geometry and physics that we understand, use those techniques, the model techniques, and where there's cognition that we can't model
Yeah,
yet.
but I think there are dimensions. I mean, when you assemble them, I mean, you understand how the pieces work,
Right.
but you don't necessarily understand how the whole thing works.
So then,
Yeah.
precisely your point, what is it that you want to understand then?
A good question. I mean, a little bit of both.
How the system operates.
I mean, so the point about the, for example, the integrated circuit or microprocessor, is it something that you come to understand, but at an abstract level? So you know how to do things with it, you know, they're predictable, even if you don't know what all the circuits inside it. So it's a sort of moving in the direction of abstract.
Oh, sorry. So I've got Sam and let Neiman have a final word, but you got a question, comment?
Yeah, I think, I basically agree with everything you just said. I mean, understanding, there's a question of building a predictive model. Everyone wants a predictive model, right? And there's a question of understanding, which is really about what scientists,
But
right?
it's also about what we can do.
Yeah,
for engineering.
Yeah.
Or how can you explain with the fewest number of symbols or whatever, something just going.
Yeah, maybe there's some theory there. I also think understanding is such a rich area. Scientists are so clever. They figured out so many different ways of understanding a system and approximating. There's like, it's going to be a whole exciting area of research over the next 20 years. Not only understanding, but figuring out what it even means to understand it, right? What are the questions that you want to ask? That's as hard as answering them.
I think the real touchstone is what you can do.
It's
the effectiveness and survival or whatever, or money or.
All I wanted to say was that I feel like those two topics are very different from biological realism. I feel like biological realism, I'm a little bit less gung-ho about because the system is so complicated. The things that are supposedly realistic are completely unrealistic. And so there's this question of what would you even want? Like you have this your brain is an unbelievably complicated neural network, way more complicated than these networks we're describing. So like, what is even the point of like exactly mimicking that, or, you know what I mean? I think productivity and understanding are really rich areas, but realism, I don't know.
Useful abstraction to do something.
Yeah,
So we need to wrap this up, because we want to talk about the work groups and we've gone a little over time. But I want to give Nima the last chance for questions and comments.
Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to say that in my view of this question, whether, which one is better, the experimental or black box is really not the right question. I think we all agree on that, right? I think the more better question is that if you have to have a model that is explainable, but how do we do it? And what's the best way to do it? I think that's a more productive question than which one is better.
Okay.
That would be good for a beer, maybe.
But it's conditional on the if.
On what?
On if, it's if you have to.
If you have to, yeah, for whatever reason, maybe you want to have a intellectual, curiosity or.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're both around, I mean, I'm gone this weekend, but we're both here next week and we'll continue the discussion here or over beers or wherever. So thank you. We want to move to the auditory work group. So if you're not part of the auditory work group, feel free to leave. But the main,
Feel free to stay also.
feel free to stay, but we won't feel bad if you want to leave. The main thing we want to do, and I don't know why, but I'm feeling a little nervous this year, maybe because I'm gone this weekend. So it's not clear how we're gonna get to the projects. But we had this wonderful brainstorming yesterday. I'm losing track of time. Yesterday, July 4th isn't helping any. But we had this wonderful brainstorm yesterday. We had this great set of word cloud of ideas and things that people are interested in. And
Maybe you can even share that word cloud. If you feel like.
well, given the time, I think everybody had some ideas.
Yeah.
So what Claire and I thought about we could do is maybe in the same sense of the word salad, let's just put up a list of projects that people are thinking about doing. So not enough, we don't have enough time to go into a lot of details, but just enough words as a placeholder, so we sort of see what people are thinking about. And the most important thing is we want to make sure everybody's connected to some projects. So either something we put up on the board, if there's something that's missing and you have some ideas and you don't know how to put on the board yet, come talk to one of us and we can help, fit it in. So I want to start with, in the next 20 minutes or so that we have before 5 o'clock, what sort of projects are people thinking about doing? No promises. 6 words. just to have a stake in the ground. All right, maybe more than 6. No, we don't want to go into depth. I just want to get a lay of the land and let people know we can move more details later.
So there's this audio encoding model interpretability project that we were discussing earlier yesterday. I've exceeded my 6 words
Yeah, fine.
for that.
No, director. Oh, this. No, that's not it. Yes.
But yeah, basically the idea is to build these black box audio encoding models and then use audio reasoning models to understand what the functions these things are computing are, so we can do science on these black box models.
Does anybody know how to turn this off?
That's all.
I don't
There
think
we
you can turn it off. It goes.
No, we did it yesterday.
Probably from the remote phone.
What's wrong with it?
Here.
For it.
You got it.
I'm gonna do that for now. Okay. Give me a few words to describe what you said.
Audio encoding model interpretability project.
Okay. Audio encoding. Interpretability.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let there be light.
I kind of have a cluster of ideas around just generally predicting things with EEG data, like using the EEG data to predict what, it's not really about predicting what's next in the EEG data, but more about predicting on like the outcomes of actual events. I've talked to a few people about it. I don't know how viable.
I think that's great. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Outcomes, I'm not putting quotes from EEG.
Yeah, I even thought a cool demo could be like predict, like somebody's playing music, EEG is on, and then training enough that you could predict from the EEG what they're expecting the next note is, and then have something actually play that note, and then from that note, what that next expectation would be, and kind of if somebody's mind playing music, it might be a little hand wavy making that mapping, but.
So we still have, we still have 16 days.
So, we want to do a rhythm study before,
What study?
rhythm
Rhythm.
study.
Okay. And this
So,
is,
This would be, we need volunteers also, we brought some software and some haptic pen to teach rhythm. Have some people test before via EEG, how they are doing in rhythmic tapping, so following the sound. Then they undergo training, they have to volunteer to practice every day, 10-15 minutes. And then we measure them again at the end of the workshop, or maybe earlier, so we can analyze the data.
I am happy to collaborate.
Great.
Drum circle.
Well, yeah. Well, then you have all these motor signals that you have to take care of, right?
So the project would be on this sensation, action, sensation, what was it? It's called SAM. Sensation, attention, action, memory. And it's sort of at the intersection between action and pitch perception.
okay, cool. Memory.
Yeah. SAA.
You were interested in integrating
Yes,
FMRI and training.
yeah, so mine is using ECOG data to predict mood response or FMRI data to the same natural sound. So FMRI data and ECOG data were obtained from the same stimuli.
Cool, good.
But not in the same zone.
Is this, oh, it's not the same subject? Okay, that's possible. Okay, well, it's possible, but
It's possible, but it's hard.
yeah.
No, they get it.
Yeah, so maybe Xiang, we have been thinking in the context of combining vision and audio.
Yes, since we're working on the violin projects and our final goal is to giving some motion feedback to get better sounds. So probably we could get some expertise audio to mapping to expertise motions, and that's the kind of reference. And given the practitioner's motion and sound, how can we move the practitioner sounds representation vectors to the reference vector to get that difference, keep the motion feedback.
Sure. One thing I asked Munia students to look at is, can we use an autoencoder model to tell us when something is speech and not speech, or tell us when we're getting errors in speech construction? So autoencoders are really good at taking these very complicated spaces and reducing it to a manifold or sub-dimensions that matter. And they do that by minimizing reconstruction error. So if you train it on speech, it's going to really know really high quality information about what an and e sound like, or and different accent. I mean, it's going to represent that space really well because it speaks a lot. But if there's a beep or the L that just shows up, it's not going to be represented. So I'm hoping we can. This might be a really quick study. I'm hoping we can get some information about speech saliency.
So they have trained already different models in audio we use for speech and for music.
Right.
With the embeddings, obviously.
Right. So we want to build on top of those.
Yes.
And test them.
Yeah. So generally, I mean, if people are interested, we were thinking about this issue. How do I ideally combine this audio and vision in the encoding, and especially in tasks that have to do with action? So ourselves, we were thinking about the motion of the dialogue. But we also have access and prepared lots of data for the egocentric actions, where people are performing manipulation actions or also other tasks. And there's data available both in first person, when vision is carried, and in third person. So there could be some exploration on how to, I think, essential tasks, the audio really helps with localization, where things intuitively. It also helps in breaking up the sequence into sub-actions, so we could maybe explore it in the context of that, how to combine the features to get more out of it and how to ideally.
Shihab and Claire, you both have been talking to a bunch of people. What sort of things are you seeing from people here?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, trying to figure out if by the end of this workshop, that you can feel comfortable actually recording EEG with motor tasks. So you can ask questions like, what is the motor activity look like? How does it integrate with the auditory or sensory activity? Can you separate the two? How do they, you know, for example, when you're speaking, they subtract, when you're doing this or that, they do. So we have to deal with questions like, how do you represent the motor activity in a way that can be predictive of the EEG?
That's something that could piggyback or support this kind of stuff is the methods for processing that type of data. For example, if you want to regress out the motor activity or
something like ICA would help.
stuff like that. So I mean, methods.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. What are you seeing, Claire?
I was actually thinking of with Shep, what you're saying, and how we can try to effectively put together a paradigm where people, someone like me, for instance, plays the violin. The output of the violin is being recorded, and then we can use this output as a replay and try to see after we've removed the emotional artifacts by many different methods, to which extent we're able to really see the envelope in the EEG, you know, the listening along condition and the action condition and stuff like that. It was interesting, and that would also be useful, I think, yeah, for developing those motion artifacts removal things.
That's great. Next week, Rick Hickok is coming. He does a lot of work on motor and audio. And I just got his talk title. He's talking at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, first talk on Tuesday morning. Speech coordination as a basis for beat perception and synchronization. I got your attention. Speech coordination as a basis for beat perception and synchronization. So we'll know more on Tuesday.
Are you going to send that through the Slack or?
Yeah, I'll put it in the calendar.
He's very, very good speaker, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. He
I
speaks
mean,
better than his
he will
Bible.
be very understandable and challenging, and
Yeah, you can push back on it.
it'll be really interesting.
So that'll be on Tuesday. We've been updating the calendar, so the calendar now reflects the speakers and the abstract if we have it.
So the general calendar.
The workshop calendar on Google.
Yeah, good.
And there's also a Google Doc, which I put in the Slack channel, that we're using to keep track of meeting notes and pointers and important locations and stuff. So do follow that.
And a Google Drive to put stuff.
And we have a Google Drive where you can put things. So if you have papers or something you want to share, I'll try to get all the presentations there.
And you're going to send out the link to that.
I put it in the Slack already.
You put it already. But
Did you have something you wanted to say, Jim? Okay. What are you seeing, Nemo? Have you seen other interesting projects?
Yeah, we talked about a couple of projects, but you know, I wonder if the people who want to do it or not want to do it should talk about it and come up with titles or not. But so the couple of projects that do you want to talk about?
Still not sure about the titles, so.
I mean, so yesterday, Ramani and they were talking about if we could use EEG to identify what they call a aha movement, like when they suddenly understand or the like become intelligible.
When they fuck it, or
Oh, yeah, that's a nice project.
So they're listening to speech, and the moment that we figure that they're understanding what they're hearing, basically.
sorry, I'm clearly not passing that test. Sorry.
So the data that we have is a little different.
Yeah.
Because we have data from 70 different people.
Oh, right.
So right. Listen to 1 hour of speech, this is EEG, and the proficiency ranges from 0 to 100, but very even, like we have like equally spaced proficiency. So that's the data. So, you know, may not be great for AHA, but we can.
So this is people who are in second language listening to English.
These are Chinese, native Chinese people.
Oh, I see.
And their English proficiency ranges from 0 to 100.
Right.
And they all listen to 1 hour of
It's
English.
really different from what. That's
Well,
not quite like you.
No, but actually, let him explain. There is lots of things in that.
It's a whole different thing.
So why not do it the other way? Why not play Chinese or teach English speakers Chinese? A few words.
A few words.
Yeah, just a few words. And then listen to that reoccur in a sentence.
So sort of like, did
I
it,
mean, it's the same.
is it a word you already know?
It doesn't-
Is it a word you already know? Perhaps.
You could do that with music. Like you play a few notes. And a few more, if you still don't get it, and all of a sudden you say, ah, I know the melody.
So you could point to objects. For example, you could say bases, right? And then listen. Recognize.
Why don't you guys explain it?
There's another complementary data set also that is the same people listening to speech and by changing the SNR, their intelligibility goes from 0 to 100. And we have also EEG and eye tracking.
But this is Chinese, right? They're listening to Chinese.
No, these are just
English.
Oh, but they don't understand English.
Sorry?
They don't.
Different amounts of.
From 0 to 100.
So this is a different task.
Okay.
A different SNR. So
Yeah,
these two
I'm
data
suggesting Chinese because pretty much there's probably only 3 people in the room here. So you got a blank slate.
I have a question, unrelated. How many people know what the word grok means?
Which would.
Grok, Grok.
It's from that book.
Robert Heinlein.
Yeah, right, finally, strange in a strange land. No,
It's basically.
it's a word he made up, Robert Heinlein made up in his book, Stranger in a Strange Land. Do you understand what's going on? Is that a good way of saying it? Did you grok it?
Yeah, do you
comprehend?
Comprehend.
I thought it was experiential.
Yeah.
G R O.
Understanding.
It means you comprehend.
ROG.
Grok.
Oh, GROG is a drink.
That, yeah, okay.
No, I don't know. It definitely might be what you were saying. Okay, stop. Okay, I didn't mean to disrupt everything.
Okay, can I say one point about this data set? Yeah, Grok is a good name for the project.
Sorry.
So the important thing is you don't want to do any processing on the input audio stimulus at all. It has to be completely independent of the, just using EEG. You sort of want to figure out when that aha moment happens.
Ideally.
Ideally, yeah. What aha moment, so that he understands the speech or what? What is the aha moment?
Yeah.
Something that is, yeah, I guess you go from.
I mean, but if the person doesn't understand English, what is the aha moment?
There's no, in this data set, you can't answer that question.
It's just a close data set related to the.
Yeah,
things, right?
exactly, yes.
So same subject, here's speech. With various levels of noise.
Yes.
Is it the same speech? Is it repeated?
No,
Again
it's
and
not.
again, it's different.
Yes. Yeah,
Because-
1 hour.
So you could, because some people have done stuff where you present exactly the same stuff. First at a very low significant ratio, and they don't understand, then a little bit higher, and then all of a sudden they
Say
start
you're
understanding.
And you get fitted with a hearing aid.
Or sine wave. We can't
Studying
like
the
that,
parameters.
Your one is.
Suddenly you can understand the speech.
Yeah, but the different.
Oh, without comprehending.
Before we can.
Hold on. Yes, please.
Before I comprehend. Just that it is.
Calling.
But we were talking about, Nima has worked with an audio foundation model, and so we were kind of tossing around different ideas for like outward domain inputs, like the model, if you have like a dolphin sound, a pigeon sound, and a person talking, you can say, please remove like the person talking.
Please what?
Remove the person talking.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah. You talked about this morning.
Yeah, and then if the model had seen a hawk sound, but you present it with something that like does have a hawk sound in it, and you want to be able to remove the hawk sound, we were generally talking about like how we would go about doing that, whether it's like with like the the semantic encodings, but also like the semantic encodings are different from the acoustic similarity. So that's just.
How would we title that this, so we can remember it next time? Out of vocabulary sound?
Sound object formation in artificial foundation model.
Is that related to zero-shot learning or one-shot learning?
You want the foundation?
Because you know, if you want to move the hawk, you have to know what it sounds like. At least have one example.
So the shock detector.
Yeah, the problem is that it could be schematically close to something.
A
and not sound.
Yeah.
So is it a clustering problem?
The clock detector is a clustering problem, huh? Before and after.
Sorry.
Is the clock detector a
No,
clustering
no.
problem?
No,
No, it's not.
it's just to understand, yeah, no.
You want the aha moment
Yeah.
to get,
So aha moment is.
or is it before I understand and afterwards?
Yeah.
I don't
So, and
understand.
somehow in EEG, it reflects. You are in a days before and you're not.
Okay,
Can I just?
yeah.
If you want to do something like this aha stuff, we could do one here in which you give two sentences, for example, one in English and in some language that's backwards English or whatever. it
So it
is.
is clustering.
And then you have people listen to them and look for some.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Some,
Before and after.
not just some,
Yeah,
that's systematically.
yeah.
And then we don't have to have 100 hours. Black
that-
boxes trained and all that.
How about jokes? You know, there are these jokes where it starts and you don't understand what the punchline is.
Don't try to
The
find
punchline-
Sophie's
When do we?
the punchline is-
Okay.
Start hearing?
Okay, it's the end of the hour we have.
No, I still didn't understand the sound object formation piece. So what's going on there? So you have a trained audio foundation model and you're trying to add a new word to it, or what's going on here?
So this is a type. So this is a model that I showed in my talk today.
Yeah.
You have this data, this speech separation thing that you can talk to. Right? So you have a mixture and you can tell it that, there's a helicopter removal.
Yeah.
There's a man who's speaking very softly,
Yeah.
is that, and so it basically is that there's a semantic interface to an acoustic model, acoustic foundation.
I see.
So the idea here is to basically look at that and try to interpret, figure out what's happening there.
In
Is
the
there
brain
something?
signal.
No, there is no brain.
Oh, just
So
now.
you have this trained model and you want to somehow prompt it.
But because of our intellectual curiosity, or what you say, satisfying.
Okay,
We
let's-
want to know how it forms sound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's move on. Lauren Fink is showing up next week or a week from now. She does eye tracking. I hope people are thinking about things that they can do with eye tracking, because we'll have this amazing resource. We have the hardware. Or I should say we have half the hardware. Does someone know where the other eye tracking classes are? Did someone get them already? We have one. We think there's a second one, but I'm not sure where it is.
There's two, yes.
Do you know where the second one is? Did anybody borrow them yet? They want to use them for the fireworks tomorrow, which I think is a cool idea. So not sure what, I don't know the details, but there's a request, so that's out there. And I don't want to lose them, because I don't know what we have. It's very frustrating. Okay, at this point, I want to ask who, let's see, how I want to do it. I want to get a sense of who doesn't feel like they have a home yet or have an idea yet. So and not quite sure the right way to ask it. So let me ask it this way. Is there who doesn't feel like they have something that is really exciting to them on this board? Let me say it that way. And go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, because if there's something that doesn't quite fit your interests or desires, then we can talk more and we can come up with some other ideas. We've got lots of expertise here. But the reason I care is because we have 16 days and more importantly, 16 nights. And I want you all to be excited about something. And the goal for this is, after we go home, you're all going to go back to your labs and they're going to ask you how you spent your summer vacation. And I want you all to have something that you think is really cool.
Comes across so nerdy.
What did you do for yourself? This is for your lab group, not for your friends at home. So is there anybody that doesn't feel like their ideas are here? And you don't have to be on the spot. If you feel like there's something else you wanted to do or think about, talk to one of the faculty, Alon or myself, or Ramani or Nima or Claire, and we can figure things out. Because I really want everybody to be excited what we're doing. So this is great. We have lots of good ideas. Usually by Thursday night, 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from tomorrow, it's 20 or 30 projects that people have done in very short. It's not all major. That might be too much, but these are things we can group together. So I think this is really good. I leave tomorrow afternoon after the parade. I'll be back on Monday. Monday afternoon, Greg Hickok shows up. I'll be available by email, but I've got a wedding to go to and I'll be distracted. At this point, Brett is going to show us how to set up a subject and the EG hardware we have for doing data recording. So if you're thinking about doing experiments, this is a great opportunity to learn from one of the experts. And that'll start as soon as we finish.
Just one question, is it worth putting names on this?
I don't want to do that yet. But
And I'm thinking of people who might want to start.
People want to coordinate it.
Yeah, if people want to start working or thinking
Well,
about
I
that.
think we should create an Excel sheet. I volunteer to do it and I'll share it.
what
And
you
then
say,
people
Claire?
can enter names in that sheet.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same idea, but I was gonna say, I'm gonna create a Google Doc with all those ideas and people can try to start to tag their name along so that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Set a spreadsheet.
So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
So, and let's maybe a contact point for each project, if somebody's interested in it, so that they could talk to somebody else.
Yeah.
Somebody who initiates the project.
I'm in charge.
Yeah.
We found it. Who here can take responsibility? Yeah, hardware. Is someone interested in this that can help keep track of it between now and when Warren gets here? Because I'm not in a good position to do that. Is someone willing to take responsibility? Just know it's here. Just so if someone asks me, I know who to ask. So
Terry, you want to?
He's all delegating. Okay.
I will put it in a particular spot in your auditorium.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll solve it. Yep. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
It's, are those the final project?
No.